Our next speaker is Jeremy Sutherland, who is a policy and special project staffer at Pasa Sustainable Agriculture. He primarily works with Pasa's policy strategists to promote and advocate for state and federal sustainable agricultural policy initiatives. He has completed graduate studies with Penn State University and has been a fellow with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, and has worked as a researcher with the United States Department of Agriculture. So we welcome Jeremy. He has the pleasure of having the last word, trying to tackle one of the, I think, most difficult parts of the Clean Water Act, which is agriculture, non-point source pollution. It has to intersections with the the waters of the U.S. that Casey was talking about in the legal, but it gets into some of the really fine nuances. So thank you, Jeremy, for sharing your time and for giving us some perspective of how we can do clean water with sustainable agriculture. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I'm Jeremy Sutherland. I'm here on behalf of Pasa Sustainable Agriculture, and today I'm going to be talking about clean water and sustainable agriculture. Mostly, though, I'm going to be talking about how sustainable agriculture can promote clean water. There we go. So thank you for the great introduction, and I really appreciate the talks today. When I came to this, I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I've learned a lot. Honestly, the talks have been really insightful, so thank you to the other speakers. I won't go through all this. Erik gave a great introduction of me, but I'm happy to talk about any of these experiences if there's questions later. But who is Pasa? I guess I should describe, who I'm representing today. So Pasa is a network. It's a network of farmers, food system professionals, change makers working together to advance both regenerative and equitable agriculture through farmer training, research, policy, peer education, local food programs, potlucks, a conference. I mean, on and on. So Pasa has this really wide network of people that are interested in sustainable agriculture and interested in promoting sustainable practices in agriculture. So a little outline, just to kind of frame what I'm going to be talking about today. So primarily I'm going to be talking about two things. The first thing is what we're calling climate smart farming practices. I'm going to be talking about what are they and how can they improve water quality. And the next thing I'll be talking about is what Pasa is doing to promote climate smart practices. So the problem, right? What is the thing that we want to get, that we want to do with agriculture when it comes to water quality? And the main thing we want to do is minimize agricultural runoff. Erik, you mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again. Casey, in the legal talk in the first session today, she mentioned non-point source pollution. Agricultural runoff is what she's talking about in non-point source mutation related agriculture. Here's a really kind of famous example. So in 2014, a algal bloom caused by fertilizer runoff in Lake Erie was so toxic that the city of Toledo had to shut down its entire tap water system. So here's a satellite view of that algal bloom. And I'm not going to go into, some of the talks today have been really technical, which I've appreciated. I've included this diagram here, but I'm not going to go into all the technical aspects of what causes an algal bloom. But essentially, it is nitrogen that is leaching out of primarily agricultural systems and yards that gets into the waterways, which creates essentially a rapid increase of cyanobacteria in waterways, which depletes oxygen, kills fish, and obviously creates a toxic environment for humans as well. So this is what we're trying to avoid. This is what we're trying to fix. So now we'll talk about ways we can do that. And the primary way to do that is improve soil health. And we can do that with what the NRCS classifies as 5 principles of soil health. And very quickly, they are maximize soil cover, so keep the soil covered with some type of living matter, integrate livestock wherever possible, have a continual living root throughout the year, increase biodiversity as much as possible, and minimize soil disturbance. These are the 5 principles, and we're going to talk about these and how each climate smart practice implements various principles in it. So what are the climate smart practices and how do they improve water quality? I'm just going to talk about a few of these. There are more, but I'm going to talk about kind of the big ones. The first 2 I want to talk about are cover crops and riparian buffers. Both of these can increase biodiversity while reducing erosion and flooding. So in most cases, when we're talking about farming and we're talking about how to prevent or how to improve water quality, we basically want to reduce erosion and we want to reduce flooding. Cover crops and riparian buffers can do both of those things. In the image on the left, the farm to the left side of the road is a farm that's implemented cover crops. And you can see there's been some sort of strong rain event. And after this rain event, the soil on the left was able to absorb the majority of that water, whereas the farm on the right side of the road that didn't implement cover crops was unable to absorb that water. And that water will eventually run off, find an exit point and run off, taking with it topsoil, sediment, fertilizer, pesticides, whatever is attached to that soil as well. In the picture on the right, you can see a riparian buffer. And this sort of gets at what John was talking about in the second talk about increasing our biodiversity and increasing those, this isn't a great term, but increasing our ecosystem services so that we can have basically more ecosystem function doing a lot of the work for us, a lot of the cleaning of the water. By increasing biodiversity through riparian buffers and other means, we can increase the bird population, which can take care of insects in cases where you have manure. It can also improve, and therefore improving bird diversity in the area. We can also improve fish diversity by having food sources for insects and as well as plants. Okay, that's all I want to talk about for riparian buffers and cover crops. The other one I want to mention is silvopasture and agroforestry. The concept is the same. Basically, we're integrating agriculture and forest together. Again, we're keeping roots in the ground and we're stabilizing the soils against erosion. So in the case of silvopasture, what we're doing is we're planting trees, new trees. So we're not putting cows into forest. We're basically putting forest into pasture. So we're planting new trees to one, stabilize soil, but also trees are an excellent carbon sink. So this acts as a carbon sink to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it back into the soil. In agroforestry, here we're integrating some sort of crop. In this case, I have a picture of potatoes integrated with trees. And this acts as, again, increasing biodiversity. So we increase the bird population, which can improve pest mitigation. So we can reduce the amount of pests on our plants. We can also improve shade. So cooler soil performs better than soil that is left bare and hot. So this is another way we can improve soil health. The last two I want to talk about are reduced or no-till farming. So again, the principle here is we're keeping the soil covered and we're also reducing erosion by having a living root year-round. And the other one is and reduced or no-till farming. There are new technical methods that allow us to do this that weren't around, 20, 30 years ago. But this allows us to basically keep something planted and interplant our cash crop in between a cover crop or some other type of plant that we have in the ground already. On the right here, we just have a pretty picture of a couple cows, but we basically have pasture-raised livestock to manage manure and build soil health. So a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, for a long time, we've seen the industry move to these confined animal feeding operations where you have a lot of animals in a dense area. And then when you do that, you're able to, have more cows in the amount of land, but you have to do something with the manure. And often this means a manure pit. And manure pits can be, toxic to birds. They can really decrease local increase local air pollution and decrease air quality. And finally, in the case of flooding events, they can, flood out and leach into waterways. So we want to avoid these manure pits as much as possible, and just getting animals back on pasture and intelligently rotating them to avoid pests can help do that. So the next question is, all right, so we kind of know some of these practices that we can implement, but do farmers even want to do this? Like, do they have any interest in doing this? And by and large, from a study that we did of our membership, the answer is yes. So here's a list of the climate smart practices. We asked, are you currently implementing these? And many people were. And then we also asked, would you implement them or enhance them in the future? And they were. And when we look at soil health, we can really see that the vast majority of our membership, at least, is already doing something to improve their soil health. And even more, 90% of our survey participants would want to implement something or enhance what they're already doing. So farmers, at least on the farmer side, they're interested in doing these things and implementing these things on their farms. So to summarize this first section, climate smart farming practices improve water quality. And we do this primarily by stabilizing soils, so keeping soil where it belongs, reducing erosion, reducing the effects of flooding, and increase biodiversity and manage manure and waste more intelligently. So this is what Pasa is primarily interested in promoting, and this is what we want to get our membership and our farmers that are in our network to adopt. Actually, we'd like every farmer to adopt these practices, but we're going to start in our network and grow from there. So what is Pasa doing now, and how are we promoting these practices? Well, recently Pasa was awarded a USDA partnership for Climate Smart Commodities grant. It's kind of a mouthful. Here's USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack and our Executive Director Hannah Smith-Brubaker speaking at Penn State about the award. But basically, this is a $55 million award. The majority of that is going directly to farmers, so we're really just administrators in this case. So the majority of that money is going directly to farmers to implement climate smart practices, some of the practices that I mentioned in the first part of the talk. The other half, not half, but another part of that is largely going to research. So we're going to look at, okay, if farmers are implementing these practices, how are we, are we able to measure the effect that we're having, particularly on soil health? And then finally, a little bit goes to just admin. So as far as what we're doing with the grant, we're really building on what we already know. So Pasa has undertaken a 6-year study, now going into our 7th year, called the Soil Health Benchmark Study. It has over 200 farmers with different management practices, from organic to conventional, no-till, reduced till. We have agroforestry. We have all of these different types of farm management systems, all participating in soil health benchmark studies. In the soil health benchmark study, to look at how these practices can improve soil health, sequester carbon, improve water quality, these types of things. The thing that we're primarily doing with the grant is we're going to expand that study to 9 states. So currently we're based in Pennsylvania. I think there's a few in Ohio, and there's a few in New York, but we're primarily located to the Pennsylvania region. We really want to expand the study to encompass more of the entire East Coast. And that's primarily what we're doing with the grant. And the next thing we're doing is also helping farmers adopt these practices. And this is primarily through training and technical assistance. So if a farmer who's been conventionally farming for a long time all of a sudden wants to know how to do cover crops, through this grant, we're going to be able to go out to that farm and provide this technical assistance to these farmers. Additionally, we're going to be doing workshops, webinars. Our annual conference is a great place for farmers to come and learn how to do some of these practices. And the outcome here is, again, we're going to try to improve soil quality across these different farms, and in turn, improve water quality. The next thing that we're doing with the grant is we're working with our collaborators. So not only do we want to improve our study, not only do we want farmers to give the technical assistance to farmers to adopt these things, we want to also provide the farmers the information that they need to understand the impact that they're having, particularly when it comes to their carbon benefits. So how much carbon, if you all of a sudden implement cover crops, for instance, how much carbon are you able to sequester through that new practice? That's what we're going to be working with our collaborators to determine. And then finally, we want to incentivize farmers to continue these efforts through a market kind of based solution, which we're calling the Food Shed Mapping Program. This is really essentially 2 parts. There's a few more smaller parts, but essentially 2 parts. The first one is climate smart labeling. So any farmer that's implementing a climate smart practice can market that almost with a seal of approval. And then the primary thing we're doing with the Food Shed Mapping Program is connecting consumers to producers. So we'll have an online resource where consumers that are interested in these types of products, or interested in farmers that are implementing these types of practice, these climate smart, eco-friendly practices, they can support them directly through their patronage, essentially. And really, to summarize this, we're basically building a flywheel, because all of these things connect into one another. So we build on what we know with our soil health benchmark study. We give that information to farmers. We provide that technical and training assistance to the farmers. We then, on the back end, help farmers understand that impact that they're having using data and using working with our collaborators. And then finally, giving that information to the consumer so that they can make the decision about, what types of products they may want to have in their home. All of which feeds back into our study, which feeds back into our training, and on and on. So ideally, this system, with this grant, will allow us to grow this flywheel that we're building organically and continue into the future. So I know we're running out of time. I kept it to 15 minutes. So anyway, thank you, and I'll take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. I know that was fast, and we've got you at the end of the session. So we were running a little bit behind, but I think you might have caught us back up to much of our schedule. So thank you very much. Fascinating to see the various strategies, the really incredible uptake of the percentage of people that you're working with that are using the different practices, and the idea that reducing the runoff is a big part of the goal of this whole effort. So really neat. I think we have one question from the group, and then some additional questions that are coming in. From Jerry, he was asking about whether and how you can expand this to larger corporate farming. Is that something that's attainable? Is that part of your portfolio already, or is that not doable?
Yeah. So let me go back. I can back up a little bit. So when I'm so in our study, in our soil health benchmark study, we have, like I said, over 200 farmers, and these are small scale farms, everything, under maybe 20 acres, all the way to really large farms, things over 200 acres. And some of those farms are affiliated with larger, maybe they source Land O'Lakes, or they source, can't remember the other one. Yeah, at any rate, these larger farmers do source these bigger companies. Now, I will say, just very quickly, companies like GM and Post, I know they're also implementing similar soil health metrics in their supply chains as well. So this isn't just nonprofit sector. We also have industry people working on this issue too.
Yeah, right. So it already is there, and you're looking to increase the uptake there. When you mentioned directly linking consumers to these producers, is this like almost like a CSA kind of thing, where you're looking at kind of sourcing your food and resource needs directly, and how much of that would be local versus regional? You mentioned most of your work is in Pennsylvania. It's expanding already into the regional thing. So that seems fascinating to think about. How you make this work and how you expand that demand and the value.
So the food chain mapping program, this actually started before we got the grant. This concept started before that we got the grant, but now having the grant, it's really going to allow us to devote a staffer to it full time. And basically what it is yes, maybe you're familiar with CSAs. For people on the call that aren't, these are like community supported agriculture, CSA, community supported agriculture. A CSA an individual farmer can operate a CSA. They can say, okay, I'm going to produce this much crop, my community will pay into that, and then that's that. Really what the food chain mapping program is an opportunity for that farmer to essentially advertise, but it's not really advertising, but basically join the program, and then any consumer in their area can look them up and find them, and then we're basically like the free middleman between the producer and the consumer. We say, hey, here's everything in your area, find what you like. So that's really what the food chain mapping program is. And again, we're going to be sort of promoting farms that are doing climate smart practices.
Yeah, when you give the example of shutting down the drinking water for Toledo, that speaks to a pretty dire problem. And the various tools in the tool shed. Generally speaking, does the agricultural community still want these to be kind of market driven and volunteer based, or regulation something that really is either inappropriate or is unwanted in the communities you work in, so they want it to be more creative?
On the policy side of things, we are seeing, well, I guess it's driven by what farmers want, and we are seeing in the new farm bill primarily, which is where our attention is focused. There's a new farm bill coming out next year. Most of the programs are going to remain volunteer based. So really what we're doing is trying to incentivize farmers to do this, potentially through this market-based approach, kind of skirting the regulatory side of things.
Yeah, right. So that still is the predominant flavor in which
moving forward, things at least in the short term will continue to be incentive-based, cost-sharing, volunteer programs.
Yeah, right.
Which have been effective. I don't want to bash any of those programs. Equip and CSP, which are the two big ones, they've been very successful. I could have done a presentation on some of their successes as well, but those do remain primarily volunteer-based.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Innovation outside of the regulatory arena. That's exciting. All right. And then last, there is, of course, local interest, and not everybody who attends a conference like this or who might watch the video afterwards is a farmer. But you think about your own piece of this beautiful earth and your own land, your planting beds, your garden, and I think a lot of people still are tilling that land. It might be isolated, and so it's not connected to a water source and doesn't directly lead to runoff. But do you even see some of these ideas going from, professional farmers to people who are doing some food production in their own plot of land? And is no-till really an option? If you're planting tomatoes and zucchinis instead of doing a big crop.
Yeah. So lots there to unpack. To answer the last one, because it's a little easier to answer, and then I'll go back. Not all the practices I mentioned can be implemented everywhere. So cover crops get harder to implement the more north you go because you have a shorter growing stage or growing period. No-till doesn't work for everybody, right? Not everybody's doing, like, if you're a if you're a cattle farmer, you're doing no-till because you're never tilling. But if you're, like you said, a tomato farmer, right, maybe there's a situation where you need to till for some reason. So there's or corn, I guess. So yeah, not all of these solutions are going to work everywhere, and I don't think we're saying that. We really just want to increase the adoption of where they can be implemented. That's what we want. And then to address your first question on the consumers, like on the really small scale, like your backyard, I think we've seen after the pandemic, a lot of people started to garden, right? So people were stuck at home and they were looking for hobbies, and people really gravitated toward gardening. We saw a big uptick in backyard gardens and porch gardens. And what you found with that was that people were pretty interested in doing it in a more natural way. So even though they adopted these things, they weren't necessarily applying Roundup to their garden in their backyard, right? They were trying to do it as organic or as sustainable as possible. That's a bit anecdotal. I don't have any hard information on that, but I do know there's a lot of evidence that during and after the pandemic, there was a big uptick in farming. And from what we've seen in our membership and just the community that support that's around sustainable agriculture, people are interested in this. The thing is called, what is it called? Integrated Pest Management, IPM. This is a big topic in the gardening community. So if you have any interest in that and you're a backyard gardener and you don't know about integrated pest management, give that a Google. It's great.
Right. Yeah. So everything at all scales, relevant, and it is a growing toolbox of things to consider and opportunities to explore. So really exciting.
And farming is great because it touches all of our lives. 3 times a day, right? You eat something. So it's the ecosystem, it's our diet, it's our health, it's the health of the water, health of soil. Farming is connected to so many things. And it's just really exciting. It's an exciting time to be working in agriculture right now, at least.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, Jeremy. We appreciate giving us that perspective. I think certainly agriculture is one of those areas that people in the Clean Water Act world recognize as challenging. And so it's exciting to see, new practices, the targeted implementation, and the adoption of a lot of this going forward. So
Try to
really
minimize the
excited.
doom, and hopefully, we can all leave the conference a little more optimistic today.
That's right. I do think that is, one of the things, and you see it, in your face and in your voice, Jeremy, right? There is hope, and that's one of the questions that I've asked, some of the speakers. And we have heard stories, right? It isn't all fantastic news. I mean, there still are plenty of challenges 50 years into the Clean Water Act. But it is clear also that there are a lot of success stories, and there are ideas on how to make, a lot more progress in the next 25 to 50 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to all of our speakers again, for sharing their time, their expertise, knowledge, and perspective on the last 50 years of the Clean Water Act. It has been great to see the progress of the last 50 years. We appreciate each of your perspectives, and insights into that, understanding the challenges going forward and what some of the opportunities are, to make hopefully as much progress in the next 50 years, for swimmable and fishable, and enjoyable waters for us all. So thank you all. Thank you all, everyone, for attending.